Yo, what's up? Over the last weeks, many new players came to Enlisted, making this a perfect moment to discuss the topic of BRs and matchmaking in Enlisted. Because there are some things most people know, but some things that almost no one knows, and I'm gonna tell you all of them from the basics to the secrets. Since the game features countless weapons of various power levels, Enlisted needs a way to create fair and balanced matches. And the matchmaking method Enlisted uses is the BR system, also known as the battle rating system. Every weapon or vehicle that you're using has a BR from 1 to 5, and the higher the stronger the weapon is. This is the core principle. Everyone understands that, but there are countless details that are making it complicated and are creating some problems and that are creating loopholes, especially if you take into account the matchmaking system across, for example, different servers, meaning where you want to play on your worldwide server access. So here are the details. First, if you go into your technology tree under your research tab, you will find these yellow tier numbers. The first important thing to understand is these tiers are not battle rating tiers. Most weapons in tier 1 will be battle rating 1, and most weapons in tier 5 will be battle rating 5, but there will be exceptions. There are multiple reasons for that. First, you see these lines have all the same length, or around the same length. This means you cannot just throw in 10 SMGs in the same tech tree. Yeah, so it's optical reasons first. Then, even if a weapon gets put into a specific tech tree, it doesn't mean that the weapon is actually perfectly placed. Because a couple times per year, some weapons get their stats changed. And then you can have a weapon that's suddenly too strong or too weak for its BR, requiring a BR change. But it won't leave its spot in the tech tree. This makes sense. Also, sometimes a weapon gets put into another BR on purpose to create more balance or to buff a weaker nation. Makes also sense. And 1 year ago, when we had the merge creating all these tech trees, there were different design philosophies. For example, grenade launchers were allowed in low BR. Now they're all removed from low BR and they all start in BR 3. In order to make sure that the beginner environment, meaning tier 1 and tier 2, is completely safe from grenade launchers, because they can be extremely strong against weak players, but they're not a problem against stronger players or really good players. So it's a choice of design, but you still can't move around these things. As you can see, Germany is completely overcrowded in BR2, and yeah, and even in BR4 you barely have play spots, especially with the vehicles. It's so overcrowded that you sometimes have to put multiple, sometimes even 3 vehicles in one single folder. So yeah, tiers don't have anything to do with BR. Most often yes, but they're not a strict rule. Okay, that's the basic understanding. Then you can see your BRs around your equipment, and you can see every real weapon, meaning every rifle and so on. Every heavy weapon also has a BR. Pistols don't have a BR, and equipment also doesn't have BR. So only your primary or secondary weapons. Okay, makes sense. Soldiers don't have BRs. Doesn't matter what type of soldier you have or what rank or level he has, no BRs involved. Squads also don't have BRs, meaning even if you use, for example, a flamethrower squad that starts at BR 3 if you play the flamethrowers, if you would take out the flamethrowers and only use basic riflemen, you would get, once again, a BR1 squad, if you only give it BR1 rifles. So yeah, you have lots of flexibility. Then there's one big problem, and this affects many new players. If you win some event squads, squads with rare special weapons have the rule that you can't take their weapons off. Meaning, if you have this weapon, it's a BR2 weapon, it's limited to BR2 and higher games, but you can't play BR1 games with this. No, you can't have a BR1 army with this. So yeah, this is a problem, or this is a feature. It becomes a problem if you're a new player, and let's say you only played one nation and you didn't touch the other nations, but you played for a while and you unlocked a bunch of squads. One trap that many players fell into recently is that when they grinded the Soviet NKVD squad, and they unlocked it, but they never played or barely played any Soviet games, since you, well, depending on how many squads you start with, you will have this squad automatically in your lineup. If you start your account only with only with 2 infantry squads. And then the game forces you to play BF5 games, because now you have the squad and you can't take it out because you don't have any alternative squads, possibly on a new account, to substitute a squad with. This is a trap, and new players need to understand it, because you will be forced to play BF5 games, although you only have 1 squad of BF5 level. Okay, but this isn't much of a problem, because if you're a new account, you play a bunch of games, and you instantly start unlocking the low tier stuff. It only takes 1 or 2 games to unlock 2 squads. So yeah, this isn't much of a problem. It's just a big surprise for many players. Another trap is if you get yourself gold order weapons as real primary, secondary weapons on your soldiers' handle, they also have BRs. Yeah, not this pistol though. As we learned, this is a pistol, so it doesn't have BRs. Though you can cheat the BR system a little bit with it in a fair way, because some pistols are stronger than weak rifles. For example, this pistol, auto 50 bullets, this is almost a SMG, yeah. And if you go to the Germans and you have ridiculous stuff like this is literally like an SMG, and you can use this on any BR. Okay, so this is one trick. And if you get yourself gold order weapons, the normal gold order weapons, of course, have BRs. And now you have to take into account, if you start a new account and you're playing on low BR, getting low BR stuff makes sense. But if you buy yourself a high BR weapon, then you will be once again trapped into high BR if you equip this weapon. And the rule for BRs is your highest ranked item defines your overall BR. So if you have complete BR1 equipment and just 1 weapon has BR5 rating, then your whole army becomes BR5. So this is the absolute important thing to understand. Always make sure that your BRs are exactly the ones you want. So before you start a game, check which BR you have here, check which BR you have equipped, and so on. Now, for infantry, it's not that much important. For most nations, for most matchups, you can defeat enemies, especially if you're playing well, that are 1 BR above you. Even 2 BRs higher can be defeated if you have a well-equipped army. The one main problem where BRs are absolutely restrictive in terms of fairness are vehicles, specifically tanks. Because tanks cannot be defeated by skill if there's too much of a power level. For example, if you look at any BR5 tank, you will see humongous numbers. Humongous numbers in terms of armor, except for the Americans, and also big cannons. Meaning, if you're playing, okay, let's say 120 and 100, if you're trying to play BR2 Germans with your Panzer IIIN, with your ridiculous, not only ridiculous armor, but also your, well, very, very short cojones cannon, you won't be able to penetrate anything. So it's impossible to win against them. It's completely impossible. Yeah, sure, you can start being intelligent and use planes and stuff like that, but it doesn't change the fact that this matchup would be absolutely unfair. So vehicles absolutely require some form of BR balancing. Now, let's say you know all of this now and you're playing your army. What matches are you going to get in? Because you rarely will get exactly the same match BR that you chose in your army. Because here's the thing. Since Enlisted doesn't have millions of players, it only has a couple 10,000 right now, and these couple 10,000 are split across 3 different servers, and not every player activates all of these. For example, if a player only plays on Eastern Europe, he won't be matching with the players on European or North American servers. Now, this means that this player isn't available for matchmaking for all the other nations, making it even more restrictive, on giving the matchmaking systems fewer players to combine. And the fewer players you have, the less precise the matchmaking will be. Now, this all in all means that if you're playing at a time with many players active, and if you're playing with many servers on, you will very likely get very close to what you've chosen. But the more you restrict yourself by these metrics, the more likely it becomes that you get thrown into different BRs. And here's what can happen. Currently, the game uses a soft and a hard rule for matchmaking. The soft rule is the precise matchmaking rule, and it's used if there are many players available. The hard rule is the rough rule that's used when there are not enough players available. The soft rule says that you will be put into a match where everyone has equipment of your BR or plus minus 1. So I would play against players with BR 2, 3 or 4. Now this is okay. It has some downsides, I'll explain them later, but for now this is quite okay. The hard rule is applied if there are not enough players. And this rule says there are only 2 matchmaking used in Enlisted. There's BR 1 to 3 and there's BR 3, 4, 5. And if you're playing BR 3, you can be put in either of them. So you literally don't know what you're going to end up. Either you're going to be the highest rated player or highest equipped player in the match if you're playing in a BR 1 to 3 game, or you will be the lowest equipped player if you get put into a BR 3 for 5 game. You can instantly check this out at the beginning of a game or after a couple of seconds when you look at the weapons that are in the kill feed, and if you see some high BR weapons, then you know exactly, alright, I was up tiered, and if you don't see a single high BR weapon, you know I was down tiered. Now, don't let yourself get distracted by beginner weapons, because in high BR games, everyone of course still can play beginner infantry rifles. So if you see a random Springfield, it doesn't mean that you're not in a high BR game. Yeah? What matters is the highest rank of rate of weapons that you see. Okay, now what does it show us for that situation here? I see, for example, I could get thrown into a BR 2 to 5 game. Now, this shows that there is, for low BR, the soft rule activated, and for high BR, the hard rule. Because because it shows there are enough players right now trying to queue with low BR equipment. There are enough BR 1 players, BR 2 players, and BR 3 players. Because if there weren't enough low BR players, a low is 1, 2, high is 4, 5, and mid is BR 3, then I would also be possibly thrown into a BR 1 game. But it's not the case. So this shows me there are lots of new players playing the game right now with lots of low BR equipment. But for high BRs, there aren't that many players, because if there were, it wouldn't show me a 5, it would only show me a 4. But since there are not enough of them, I might get up-tiered, and then I don't just get up-tiered into BR 3 and 4 games, I get up-tiered by the hard rule into a 3, 4, 5 game. So this is the complicated thing that many new players don't get, and this is how you can see by these numbers shown here at any moment how many players at the moment are queuing. You can also see the maps or theaters or campaigns that you can get thrown into. I linked under the video a simple graph that shows you, or a simple table that shows you which maps you can get depending on which nation, which BR you're playing. These are the old campaigns. Before the merge, you didn't have just nations, you had campaigns, and you had multiple nations in every campaign. You have 2 nations in every campaign. For example, Battle of the Bulge was Western Front, Americans versus Germans, and so on. And each of these theaters contains a bunch of maps. And this is how you can easily see, alright, where I'm going to play. Now, what's important to understand, especially for new players, not all maps in the game are fun to play. And some maps you will like, some maps you will hate. And some maps are, or most maps are exclusive to specific BRs. And this is one of the most important factors to have fun in Enlisted, to actually get the maps you want. Since there's no direct map picking right now included, you need to know which maps you can get according to your nation and BR combination. For the Japanese, it's very easy. They only get the Pacific against Americans. Alright, across all BRs. For the Germans, it's the most complicated because they're the center of the war, and obviously they are everywhere in Europe. So you might play either against Americans or against Soviets. And here's the problem: depending on your BR, you will get different maps. And here's the big takeaway. The low BR maps for Germans are by far better than the high BR maps. And especially there are more really good ones and there are fewer really bad ones. So if you want to get really good maps, just stick strictly to BR2. I, for example, if I want to have fun, play basically BR2 Germany, because this gives me access to all the great maps. I could also play BR2 Americans or Soviets, but Germany, because then I would also get some of these good maps, but Germany gets all of them because it's literally always fighting against these two nations. So if you want to have the best maps, low BR Germany is the greatest stuff. If I would play BR3 Germany, I would start getting up tiered most often, and then, yep, then I would start to get the bad maps too. And here, if you have a BR2 army, we see, alright, it's using the, well, soft rule. There's no alternative because I can only play, obviously. I cannot get up tiered. Yeah, since if you're BR2, you can only play against BR1 to 3, which is great. Because, yeah, you don't want to play against BR4 stuff. Another thing to know about BRs is that there are power jumps. The power jump from BR1 to 2 isn't that big. It isn't that big, especially if you become good with bolt action rifles and pick a rifle that you like the sights and that has a good fire rate. You don't have anything to fear. You can easily defeat BR2 stuff with BR1 rifles, and you can also still easily defeat BR3 equipment with BR1 or 2 equipment. So the power jump in terms of weapons, infantry weapons, isn't that high. Regarding vehicles, the power jump gets much higher. From 1 to 2 it isn't that high. You can still easily defeat the tanks of BR2 with BR1 tanks. But the jump from BR2 to BR3, this is where the problems begin. Because you obviously don't compare your own tanks, you compare your tanks against the enemies. And if you're playing Germans, if you play against BR3 Americans, this isn't that much of a problem because their tanks aren't that strong. They aren't that well armored. So you can blow them up with the good BR2 German tanks. But the power jump from BR2 to BR3 against Soviets, this is where the problems begin. Because the Soviets start with stuff like T-34s, which are absolutely way superior than they're basically in every regard better than German BR2 tanks. And they can easily one-shot you. So this is a problem. And they also have KV-1s. And this is absolutely insane because you can't do anything against KV-1s unless you get very lucky. So yeah, this is the reason why BR2 to BR3 has a significant imbalance involved, because for most nations they just can't compete. Same thing goes for Americans versus Germans. The Americans, they have the weakest tanks together with the Japanese overall. And if they play against the Germans, they also suffer. If you have BR2 tanks, they're not that good against German BR3 tanks because the German BR3 tanks get overall really good. And the Japanese, they usually have the weakest tanks overall, with very few exceptions. And since they have the weakest tanks, but also the worst planes because they all start on carriers, with very few exceptions once again, you don't want to get up-tiered against Americans. Now this means that if you're playing a nation like Japan or Americans, it's much beneficial to play straight BR2 and not BR3. Play BR3 only if you have some really perfect min-maxed armies. That's why I made the BR3 guides, for example, where you can see how you can equip your army to still defeat enemies if you get up-tiered. But you don't want to just, as a new player, rush into high BRs, because there you won't have much fun because you won't be able to do much against your enemies. Now, Germans and Soviets, having the strongest tanks overall in the game, they can much better deal with enemy tanks if they get up-tiered. But still, the power jump from 2 to 3 is still noticeable. Now, another big power jump is from 4 to 5. The jump from 3 to 4 is also quite strong, but BR3 tanks usually can deal with BR4 tanks. So that's not much of a problem. And the infantry weapons also not that much stronger in BR4 than BR3. Once again, the tanks are the biggest problem because the jump from BR4 to 5 is the most extreme. Why? Because BR5 contains not only weapons that are proportional to BR5 power, but also to BR 5.5 or 6 power. But there's no BR 6. So all of the overpowered stuff is stuck into BR 5, meaning you get things like the Tiger, who gets 100 frontal armor and medium long 88 cannon, alright. But you also get the King Tiger H, which has 150 and 180 armor, and a long 88. And the long 88 penetrates around twice as much as the medium long one. So yes, that's a significant problem. If you by some chance could find weak spots and penetrate a Tiger with your BR4 tank playing Soviets or Americans, you won't have any chance at all against this one. So you see, you need your own BR5 tanks. So these are the hard caps. And the infantry weapons also have an extreme power creep from BR4 to BR5. Because, yeah, in BR3 you have your medium good semi-auto rifles, and BR4 you have your good semi-auto rifles. Okay, but you still can easily overpower by playing well or strategically intelligent. But you cannot overpower enemies who have full auto rifles with your semi-auto rifles. Doesn't matter if you're playing Soviets or Americans. So there's absolutely no chance. Also, Tier 5 has the assault rifles, and you can't defeat assault rifles using semi-auto rifles. Once again, no chance. So yeah, keep in mind, if you're playing higher BRs, if you want to play BRs right now with not enough players available, Tier 4 is basically the dead tier, because it's the absolutely by far least attractive tier, since if you play Tier 4 you will be basically always up-tiered into BR5 games, and then you just get destroyed, because as already explained, your weapons are just much weaker. So instead of playing Tier 4, it's better to either play an optimized Tier 3 army or to play some Tier 5 stuff. But don't play Tier 4 at the moment. This is a big trap and it leads to lots of frustration you can easily avoid. Now for the end, I have some tricks for you that you can use to your benefit within all of this matchmaking BR stuff. First of all, understand that the player population fluctuates between nations over time. This means it's a natural process that not throughout the whole year all the nations are exactly the same populated. What usually happens is that you have migrations from one faction to the other, and then 1 month later the most popular or the more popular nation for that month gets less popular and another nation gets more popular. This is absolutely normal in every game. Now this also means that if you're playing, if you want to grind a nation, if you start out and you have weak equipment, it's easier to play the more popular nation right now than to play the least popular nation, because there you will have lots of games with bots, meaning the enemy teams will be full and your teams will be empty and only have possibly 2-3 real players and the rest are bots, and the bots are horrible. Especially if the few players who are alive aren't that good at playing. You can win games with bots if you spam rally points and APCs, but this isn't what's happening usually, so yeah. You want to avoid weakly populated factions if you are not completely dominant in your army and in your game style. Also, there's a way to predict these migrations. Some of them are random, some of them are just follow chaos math. Others, though, are easily understandable. For example, currently we have this resistance event. And this event will give you an American partisan squad. Now, what do you think happens on the 9th day of this event? Where everyone gets the American squad. Yeah, Americans will get a popularity boost. Now, this squad isn't too fancy, because you literally get an American partisan squad in the tech tree, and partisans aren't too exciting, so yeah. But last month, when we had the NKVD event and these dudes dropped, everyone went crazy, because everyone started playing Soviets for 1 week. And yes, guess what? The servers were full of Soviet players and barely had any other players. So if you wanted to play, well, the German population could deal with it, because Germany is the most played faction in the game. But it's still, if you played American or Japanese, you had severely empty servers. Same thing happened when the Germans got their NKVD equivalent squad. When they received the machine gunners, well, then the Soviets were completely empty. You barely had Soviet players because everyone wanted to play the German event squad. So this is something you want to watch out when events are going on, which nations are getting fancy stuff. Also, whenever there's a new big update, some nations get very fancy stuff and others don't. And the ones that don't, they barely get played then. And the ones who got the new stuff, everyone wants to play them. For example, recently the Germans got a lot of new stuff. They got the duck plane with a literal tank cannon under its nose. Everyone wanted to try it out. They got the Marder tanks, and which sucks sadly. And they got a bunch of, well, not only one partisan squad, but even a second partisan squad if you want to buy a premium squad, with ridiculously overpowered weapons. And they got the PPSH Abres, which is also on paper an insane weapon with its ridiculous fire rate. So everyone wanted to play Germans. In this type of situation, if you're a new player or if you just want to have relaxed games, it's easier to just play Germans yourself too than not. Then there's this join any army button. Now, as you know, or might know, if you win a game in Enlisted, you get a 50% win reward. But if you lose a game, you don't get a win reward. Now, this is equivalent to getting a penalty because if you you can also define winning as the standard 150% prize. But if you don't win, you get a 33% penalty by losing the 50% advantage. So yeah, you're getting actually penalized for losing games Enlisted. But there's a way to avoid this problem by clicking on Join Any Army, because now you have the super matchmaking activated with additional prizes, meaning if you win, you get 80% booster, or you get 80% more experience instead of just 50. And if you lose, you still get your 50% win bonus, even though you didn't win. So, yep, if you want to grind experience, and especially if you want to grind silver, this is really good because you always get your big bonus. Now, there's one downside, and it's the fact that this will put you most often into the least played faction right now, or into wherever a match is made, and wherever a real player is needed. Meaning all of your nations will be possibly candidates for you to be thrown into a game. Now, this makes your nation grind much slower, because you're possibly gonna play on, well, not the nation you want to actually grind, but it will increase your silver gain because you always have the bonus. So yeah, this is something you want to watch out for. If someone wants to play super casual and super random, this might be actually the best way to play Enlisted, because then you can completely forget about min-maxing and just literally enjoy the game by playing unranked, unleveled armies. And yeah, this can be a very relaxing way to enjoy Enlisted. There's one great trick how you can influence which army you will play by the Join Any Army button. And it's by setting the army you want to play as slow as possible, for example BR2, and then setting everything else BR5. Because you're much more likelier to play low BR than high BR, especially if the game grows and there's constantly new players playing all low BR. And then you can literally just, well, if you click on it, most often, definitely more than 50%, I would say roughly 80%, you will get exactly the one low BR nation that you want to grind. Now, if you're a new player, how do you get all of the BR5 stuff? Very simple. If there's some way for you to get some BR5 item, do it. Equip it on the nations you don't want to play, and then congratulations. For example, if this was a BR5 army, all I would need to do is either equip this event squad, because if you play the game for 1-2 months, you will have a couple of event squads with high BRs, and this automatically BR5. If I didn't have any BR5 German stuff, I would possibly get this gold order gun, and now I'm also BR5. So you can see my army changed instantly to BR5. Or, well, if I'm playing burgers, well, I can also just give them some kind of BR5 squad or whatever. And this is how you can manipulate the system and significantly increase your silver gain and your experience gain by this Join Any Army button. That most often will go exactly to what army you actually wanted to play. Alright, as a last little bonus, there's one thing that manipulates the way that BRs work, and it's stacks. It not directly manipulates the BR system, but it manipulates the matchmaking, because you can, if you go on your friends list, you can click on people and invite people, and you can build a stack of up to 4 players. And then you queue together into the same game. A 4 stack is obviously much stronger than a team containing a 4 stack will be much stronger than a team without. Because a team without is usually random players who don't communicate, who are on average much weaker than the stacked players, and who likely also contain bots. But a game with a stack much less likely has bots and has much higher player quality. This makes it almost impossible for teams to win against stacked teams. Now, this is a problem. And keep this in mind, some factions are highly stacked, others are not. For example, BR5 Japanese, because Japanese are among the least played factions, they have some hardcore fans though, and these fans usually play in stacks. So if you play BR5 Japanese, you might be quite safe because you might get into a team which plays these stacks. But if you're a new player and you play a normal BR3 army, well, you might get put up against the BR5 Japanese army and in a match, and then you have to play against a stack, and that could be problematic. So this is something you want to watch out. And what this means for you is that if you are playing unpopular factions, and if you are, especially if you're starting the game out, try to queue up with other people. You can do it perfectly by going into the Enlisted Discords, and there are 2 I can recommend. The official Enlisted Discord, because they are the most people, and the Florida Discord, because they are the nicest people, and then you can queue up with people and have fun playing with them and get much better at the game, and also have more balanced games, because now you're also together in a group and you can learn while playing with others. This is how I learned the game. I played with one extremely good player for a couple of months, for 2 months, and then I was one of the best players in the world myself, although I started out as a very bad noob. Yeah, so very, very simple. And for the stacks, the only thing you need to know is 2 stacks are good, but can be a bit weak. 3 stacks are basically perfect, because then you have much more impact, since you can have 3 rallies and 3 APCs, and having 6 spawns means you basically win every game. And you can also very nicely coordinate and split up if you need infantry or tanks or planes or everything together. You can work it out. 4 stacks are usually not good, because then games get too easy and you won't learn anything. Because if you constantly play in 4 stacks, you don't feel any pressure by the enemies anymore, and then you become worse and worse and worse, because you can only become better if you feel high pressure, and you can only keep your power level if you constantly feel at least some significant pressure. But not feeling any pressure at all by the enemies will make you a weak player. So 2 to 3 stacks is perfect and can help you a lot if you want to deal with all of this complicated BR stuff in Enlisted. Alright, that's it. Was a long video, but yeah, BR system is very complicated in Enlisted. But now you know everything about it. Oh, guess what? Here you see, if I play BR3 Americans, I get a 1-5 enemy setup now. And you can see how it changed relative to a couple minutes ago. Because yeah, now apparently fewer players are playing in that case. Alright? Until next time, goodbye.